Hello and welcome to the Law Deals podcast, where we discuss law firm succession plans, profitable law partnerships, and law firm purchases and sales. I'm your host, Ed Alexander. I've practiced transactional business law for 30 years, have my own practice, Alexander Business Law, and I'm a principal with Fitzgibbon Alexander, a business intermediary firm. We're on a mission to make sales of law firms commonplace so you can enjoy your practice and your life. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Law Deals podcast. On this episode, I have the pleasure of speaking with Tom Tona. Tom has been a friend for a long time, and he is the founder and CEO of Tona Law, and just an absolutely dynamic and wonderful, really business owner of a law firm, as well as a great attorney. So, Tom, tell us a little bit about your background.
Hey, Ed, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. I love the podcast. Background-wise, I've been in business since 2001. I sometimes forget to look back and say, man, it's been 23 years. Live in Long Island, New York, and the firm practices two practice areas: personal injury, plaintiff's personal injury, and no-fault collections.
So the no-fault collections is a little bit different than a lot of practice areas. So why don't you just give us a little bit of description about that? And I love the story of how that came to be. So tell me about that.
So I was under a tremendous amount of stress at the time. I will not forget my newly pregnant wife saying, your first child is on its way. And as that does to most men in that position, is it throws you into an emotional state, right?
Yep. You know, it's interesting. Mark Powers had this great comment, and it's basically like, boys do not become men until their wife has the first child, right? Because at that point, you're like, holy crap, I have this little human being I've got to take care of, right? So great.
Yep.
So continue on.
Yeah. So once the panic subsided, I started to look at my business. We were in business going on 5-7 years, and the nature of personal injury at that time was, and it still is for most firms, very spiky cash flow, right? And then I wanted to expand, and I'm like, and it was because of Atticus. They said, look, where do you see the opportunities, right? Like, do you give yourself the bandwidth to stop, give yourself the opportunity to examine your business? So I sat down with a notebook and I was like, okay, I treat these cases, and it's a B2C silo, I call it. It's business to consumer, retail, law, right? Anytime you're dealing with the general public. And I physically drew out the map of the start of a case to the end of the case. And I started to map out who touches that client. And then I said, who touches them the most is doctors, not physically, figuratively, right? So I said, okay, what services can I render to the medical profession? And that's how I then started jotting down, okay, their biggest pain points are getting paid and business, right? So I developed a business model of how I can improve payments and collections for doctors that were taking no fault, which is part of auto accidents in New York. It's called personal injury protection is the formal name. And I realized that I could get that rolling right away. It was kind of a back of the envelope, business model to begin with. And then it was already baked in. Right. So it was a way to me then add value to the profitability of the cases I was already doing. And I started with one doctor and I grew it, to what it is today, about 350 medical practices. That goes up or down by 50 any given time. And, we went from 10 files from one chiropractor to, I think we're going to cross 14,000 filings this year.
So you got a real machine, a real business there. This is definitely not Tom doing anything in this other than managing and acting as CEO, right? I mean, so this is the perfect element of a business. And at this point, how is most of that business coming in?
It's almost self-referring. I know that sounds a little crazy to say, right? But one of the things I believe is if you do excellent work, that's good marketing, right? And what do doctors love more than anything else? Getting paid. So like my marketing elevator pitch used to be, listen, I'm the guy that when you get envelopes from me, it's money. You're going to be the only person to ever be happy they get an envelope from me, because most of those other people are either being sued or something like that, right? So I said, that's your pipeline. I'm your cash pipeline. That's what we market. And because we have a very high success rate, all obvious disclaimers apply. We don't guarantee results, all that stuff. Right. But we have a very high success rate. We're all fully contingent on both sides. But the difference is that the no fault, it's a shorter time frame. It's smaller dollars. But if you set it up the right way, it became a printing press for me.
It's basically a process-oriented component to your firm, right? So we kind of talk about the different types of firms, the three different types. There's a process firm, the relationship firm, and then the brain surgery firm.
Right.
And so you've managed to do something that a lot of firms can't do, which is you have that process component together with the relationship component. The nice part about the process component is once you set it up, if done properly, it can run on its own. It ends up being the flywheel. Now, the one thing you did say that I want to add on to, I don't want to directly disagree with it, is if you do good work, cases will come. If you do good work and you market properly, cases will come.
Absolutely. Yeah. 100%. But people do forget, there are good marketers out there doing crappy work.
Absolutely.
Right. And so that's a sell and repent model, which I detest. Yes. And it actually has led me to my model today, which I will tell you, I love your breakdown, the brain surgery model, the relationship model, and the process model. I actually have all three going on right now. So I wasn't content to do just personal injury the way we were doing it. And I have a seizure, an entrepreneurial seizure, again for the 100th time after starting EOS, right? The entrepreneurial operating system, right? So I start to look at the landscape of my personal injury silo, and I say, look, I made a really good living doing this. I'm making good money doing it, but I need to give these clients more. And I realized Patrick Wilson and I did a deep dive on my inventory, and I saw that I have very high value complex litigation. I have very higher volume advertising type level of cases in the PI side. And then I took a look at what I needed for lawyering. I said, listen, we're going to a trial model. Beginning of actually last quarter, after investing in it and going deep into the investment, I said, we are going to a trial model. And so some of you are here, you may not want that, and that's okay.
So tell me what you mean by trial model.
Sure. So you have, in my opinion, three types of firms, personal injury firms. You have pre-suit firms. All they do is high volume advertising, typically smaller value cases, refer out the big cases, refer out all the trials and all the litigation, right? They're kind of like turn and burn. It can be a good business model. Then you have this brain surgeon models, right? Where it's complex litigation, boutique. They do 10 files a year, but they're massive litigations. That's a different type of inventory. And then you have a firm like mine. I have both. And the trial model for me is where it's at, because if you're going to take in personal injury, you owe it to your clients to get top dollar, and you owe it to them to be ready, willing, and able to try the cases. Could I refer them out? Yes, they'll get great lawyering, right? But I'm doing it. My name is on it. So I took in a hellacious wrongful death case, and I said, I need certain things done on this file, and I don't want to be the one doing it, right? That was the CEO brain of mine going, there are people better suited for it, people that love it. And so I brought on a trial team of assassins trial, 2 trial guys, right and left hand. And I sleep at night. My clients are getting the best level of lawyering and best returns. Best level of lawyering for me was the key. It's not about the money. The money will come, but to me, here was the thought process. Client, wrongful death, horrific, high earner. Woman comes to me. She's 50. The guy was 50. And I said, that could be me. And do I have what I need to lawyer this case? And if this was my wife, would I want her hiring my law firm? That was at 3:00 in the morning. It woke me up.
That's a fantastic point of view. I mean, talk about really being devoted to the client. That's just wonderful. Yeah. So, Tom, I mean, you've got a really complex operation now, right? And one thing that I want to make sure that listeners know is that it's unusual to be able to have three types of firms under one roof, right? So you've used the term silo, and I think that's a really accurate term because when you have a process firm, you got to be focused on the management. You got to be focused on the standard operating procedures, getting things done efficiently with the lowest level of competence possible, right? So people have to be competent, but you don't want an attorney doing paralegal work. You don't want a paralegal doing legal assistant work, right? So lowest level of competence to make the return on that case great. The relationship firm is really all about managing the relationship. It's making sure the client is happy, making sure that there's communication going on there so the client understands what's going on. Now, that's not to say that there's no communication in the process firm, but it's less important in the process firm than it is in the relationship firm. And then you also have this brain surgery component in there. And all three of them really require a different approach. So, I mean, kudos to you that you've got it under one roof. It's wonderful that you've been able to do that. So really great. But what I'd like to do is maybe pull you back to 2001, right? So you have the first of your entrepreneurial seizures that we call them, right? And so tell me about you're working at a firm and you decide, I've had it with this. I'm going to start out on my own. Tell me about that.
So I'm a big believer in marketing, right? And I always did it. Like I had a firm expense account and they would inevitably complain every month because I would take doctors out all the time to get cases. So as a young associate, I generated 45 cases. It was almost unheard of, especially at that time, right? Like I was a marketing guy. So, and I was also trying cases. So right away I had this double component of business side, and I loved personal injury. Like I took to it like a fish to water. I loved negotiating and I loved trying cases. So I would use this marketing budget and I get to these 45 cases and now I'm banging out settlements and I'm banging out my cases and I'm making the exact quote from one of my mentors was, look, you're going to have to leave and not in a bad way. You're making more money with what you're doing than some of our newer partners. And, and I understood that, right? So he said, and I love this guy for this. He said, take your files, cut us back a third on everything and pay us back the disbursements when you settle cases. I thought that was ultimately super, super fair. Guy gave me a leg up.
It's insane. But I got to tell you, it's insane from the perspective of an owner, right? Because why not say, "Oh my God, this guy is really killing it. We need to bring him into ownership. We need to put golden handcuffs on him."
Yeah.
So we get
Which
our piece of this action.
I would do that. Do that, right? But they were already so top heavy that it was not something that would have been good for me, to be honest with you. Like I'm a big believer in leverage. I don't want 5 partners, no leverage, and it's basically back to eat what you kill. And then you got guys that are going to eat more because they've been there longer, even though they don't generate as much, right? And I can say that half of them are dead now. So
then you fight over sharing the overhead. Is the overhead allocated by the revenue? Is it allocated by the person, right? All of those things. Yeah.
Yeah, I had no interest in that. So it wasn't until so he was going into a political position, right? He got a political job offer, and he was saying this all to me one night over drinks, and he's like, so you should go out on your own and we'll do everything we can. And they did. They helped me with everything. They helped me get my first line of credit, all of it.
Wow.
And I'm eternally grateful. I got home to my condo because I had just bought a condo, and I was like, oh shit, I got fired today. I got fired, right? So I had a couple more in a nice way, but I was like, oh, they just let me go. But the obstacle is the way, man. I sat down with a bottle of scotch at the time because I was a drinker. I'm not anymore. And I sketched out a business plan. Next day I was open for business. Right. I had my consents to change attorney ready. I had my deal with them in place. And it was me and a laptop. I sublet space from a lawyer. It was me answering my own phone.
Yeah.
And I started the way everybody does, man. I was doing per diem, right? I was scared.
Yeah.
I took in everything. If the guy wanted me to do real estate closings, I learned real estate closings. I was able to do that. And so I started that way. And then I was like, oh, wait, leverage means if I hire a paralegal or a legal assistant, I don't need to do all the typing, which
Right.
my time is worth more money. And that was the first spark that led me to the first hire.
So when was that? How many months out of you and your laptop opening for business?
It might be 12 months.
Okay.
Let's say it might be 12 months because as I started to listen, I'm leaving out that I settled my first personal injury case on my own for like 180 grand. $60,000 was, I could live. Nowadays that gets burnt way quicker with the infrastructure I have.
Right.
$60,000 back then. I'm like, I could probably take off 4 months right now. I could live on 60 grand, for 4 months, 3 months. So, but the cases I knew cash flow is king. You got to be settling cases that should be settled, moving to trial on the complex stuff. So that's where my siloing in my brain started to take shape.
Okay.
I started to say, oh, not everything is treated equally. Clients, even in personal injury, you get the service you pay for, even though they don't pay out of pocket.
So that's an important distinction right there, right? Is that you can't treat all clients the same. And at the end of the day, if you have an opportunity to take in a case that is, I'm just going to go in attorney's fees, right? It's a $50,000 attorney's fees versus a $5,000 attorney fee. Well, you clearly want to take the $50,000. Now, one thing to remember though, is that's a focus on revenue, right? So what you have in place, Tom, is a system. And so you're able to generate a higher level of profitability off that $50,000 case than the $5,000 case. But if your profitability on the $50,000 case is lower, then you should not go for those $50,000 cases. This is where hourly rate billing screws up the overall profitability of a firm, right? Because if you get, I don't know, whatever, $3,000 of profitability off that $5,000 case, but you're getting $10,000 off of the $50,000 case, you should do more $5,000 cases, not the $50,000 cases, right? Yeah.
Right.
So,
right.
But in your case, you were able to make that profitability match the higher fee that you were going to get off of it. And so getting those higher value cases made the most sense.
Yeah, to me also, I've been talking about it a lot with my PI attorneys and with my leadership team is the time value of money. Lawyers screw this up a lot, right? Not screw it up, but they lose sight of that. They get caught. I had lunch with a PI attorney yesterday, he owns his own firm, and they get caught up in I have to use the word ego, right? Like you don't get into PI because you're shy. You get into PI because you love to scrap. You love to throw down. You love to negotiate and you love to fight. But at some point, if you have the epiphany of what's in the best interest of the client, right? It's not just about max profitability for me. It really isn't. It's about the right result for the client. So when I say clients get the service they pay for, they're still getting great outcomes. So it becomes an incremental game, right? So talk about that $50,000 settlement for right now. We took a case this morning. One of my lawyers settles a case. He took the case from 35 to 55. It's max value. And he's going to do it in 24 hours. That's highly profitable. Right. So what I was explaining to my leadership team on that is he might get $3,000 more over 6 months. That's where you're losing money. In my opinion, I don't care if I'm making $10 million a month. I don't want somebody to hold on. So there's two curves, right? If you picture the value of the case on the left-hand side of the graph, and I'm going to try to do this verbally, and the value of the case on the x-axis. Well, the value of the case goes up infinitesimally, you would think, right? But the profitability doesn't go up the same way. The profitability goes up, and then there's a downturn point of diminishing returns. Right. And so I live in that headspace. I preach, look, Clients don't want it either. The time value of getting that extra $1,000 for 6 months, you're working for $5 an hour now, and you're not a $5 an hour lawyer. And the clients don't want to hang on for that extra $600 for 6 months.
Right. So the way I characterize that is maximizing versus satisfying. And yeah, could we go out and get another $1,000? That's maximizing the return, the total gross revenue associated with it. But satisfying it is where everybody really gets the highest return, because we're factoring in the real variables, which include time. And so if you're not adding that time factor in, you're really missing the second variable of that equation. So yeah, great point. Love it.
I often, by the way, to drive this point home, use a present value calculator on cases. And I started doing that in COVID because I realized the whole business model changed if you're a New York personal injury attorney, because the cases were essentially frozen for 2 years. 2 years, the courts were backlogged because there were less judges and they didn't have the budget to expand the court budgets. And so you had to revalue cases for yourself, for the clients. Now, that being said, the courts are open. I'm getting trials again. So now the values can be readjusted upwards, and they're going higher, because the other thing a lot of attorneys listening to this may not factor in is when inflation goes up, so do case values. Right. Subconsciously, if the cost of bread tripled, guess what? Those jurors know it's not what it used to be. You got to factor that in. You got to factor in. That's why a lot of bigger verdicts are coming down now. So yeah, it's an interesting interplay between actual economics and what we do.
Yeah. So Tom, what I want to kind of get you to is the point where you hired your first real producer, right? It's an area where a lot of smaller law firms kind of fall down, because the lawyer is typically scared to hire another attorney, because there's, hiring an associate versus hiring a staff member, the salary and the commitment is completely different. And so at some point you realized, hey, this needs to happen. When was that, and how did that come about?
So my first producer was Janira, and I got lucky, right? Like a lot of people know the story, but I'll tell your listeners that my legal secretary at the time, my first hire was basically a legal assistant / legal secretary. No real formal training. I didn't know what I was doing or even looking for in hiring. Yeah. Like, it was a mess, man. Like, to think about my gap in knowledge from when I first started to now is unbelievable. But so my first producer, I always joke around, I didn't still know what I was doing hiring, but my legal secretary at the time was in the restroom, and there was a woman in there crying over her current job who needed a job. So I was like, bring her in. I'll hire her. I don't care. So I said, give me a resume. She was working at a law firm down the hall. I probably looked at the resume for 3 minutes, and I was like, you're hired. The blessing in disguise was Janira was classically trained as a paralegal and also had a 4-year degree in business administration / law firm administration. She had an associate's degree in law firm administration. So what I got was the perfect storm of like a ferocious...
You won the lottery.
I did. So when I say she was a producer, her and I were like the Batman and Robin of personal injury forever. And then as we grew, she grew with me and she grew with the firm, and she's my right hand. She's my integrator. She's like that COO level administrator where,
still there today. So
still there 20 years today. Yeah. 20
fantastic.
Years. We just celebrated her wonderful. 20th anniversary.
Nice. So you hire Janira. She starts producing for you. You're very, very happy, right? So the thing that can happen, right, is if lightning strikes like it did for you, you're like, oh, I'm great at this. This is wonderful. Let me go out and hire somebody else. What happened next?
I'm trying to think. So you asked me about my first associate. Let me think who was my first associate. Okay. My first associate was somebody, again, I didn't realize it at the time. I struck lightning again. And the difference was if I knew then what I know now, she would still be with me. She was that good. She could try cases, not necessarily complex, like the trial person in my firm now. He's got 100 verdicts under his belt. She didn't have
Wow.
that, but she was an excellent lawyer. But no, I didn't know what I was doing. And as is wont, when you have a certain personality type like mine, if you don't know what you're doing and you're growing, you can make a mess of things. And so, things get messy anyway. And I try to now be the point that I'm not making the messes. The messes come naturally. Those are enough. I'll go slower to go fast versus just going fast through everything.
Yeah, well, your integrator helps you not make the mess, right? Because I assume you follow the rule that the visionary comes up with the idea, and if the integrator says no, the idea goes away. Is that?
Yeah.
Do you follow that?
So the rule with first of all, I've been blessed 4 times over. I'll tell you that my leadership team right now is unbelievable. Right? I got Janira, who's my integrator, and Janira does have a veto power over everything under EOS, with the exception of law stuff and ethics, right? Law stuff and ethics, that never gets delegated. And then I have an HR person, my secret weapon, my wife, who's been in my head of finance forever, who does an unbelievable job. And then Carissa, who heads up No Fault, who every year they're just leveling up, all growing with the firm and growing as individuals, right? So every time we add somebody, like when we added my HR person, Isis, the entire team just got better. We got better. She brought a different skill set. She's done HR at these big multinational corporations. And she came on and I said, I want you to help me build, right? Help me build. And not only that, full authority on this. When the trial guy came in, I said, I want to build a trial firm off of you. And he was like, done. And I will not micromanage you. Done. And you have complete latitude. You tell me what you want, I'll buy it for you. Meaning whatever infrastructure you want. So then the real investment started, right? Like getting him the right assistance. He said, I want this person. I gave him that person. It was his right-hand man. Guy's been an unbelievable addition, right? So what I started doing was getting over my fear of letting go and saying, tell me what you need. I'll get out of your way. I don't tell them how to lawyer, right? That's going to piss these guys off. I would never do that, right? So I don't tell them how to negotiate. They know how to negotiate. They get better numbers than I do.
A couple of things that I just want to back up on. So you go on this hiring. You went hiring primarily because you were marketing and getting too many cases in there. Now, a typical lawyer would be like, oh, how do I make sure that those cases are going to continue to come in? And so you're out there marketing. Pretty much it's a natural for you. But having said that,
yes,
you later on went through a process of going and systemizing that marketing. And I want to get to that in a minute. But effectively what you're doing is you're bringing people on. You hire the best that you can find, even if it's dumb luck, you hire best that you can find, and then you get the hell out of their way. So you're not micromanaging them, right? So a couple of keys to success. And you're focusing on the highest and best value. And your highest and best value is, I'm going to lead and I'm going to go out there and market because I've got relationships in the community, right?
Yep.
So those are really the keys that brought you to the point where you are today. And you kept adding on and you looking for opportunities. And as you see the opportunity, you're like, okay, what can I do? Or you have a problem and you look back on the problem and say, what are the characteristics of this problem and how can I add something on without completely changing the focus of my firm like you did for the PIP related work that you're doing. So kudos to you. I mean, you've built a fantastic firm, really interesting to watch it, to be your friend and talk to you about it. It's really, I really love it a lot.
Thank you.
At what point in this process did you get into the coaching arrangement? I know you talk a lot about coaching on LinkedIn and in Lead Counsel podcast. Tell me a little bit about what got you to the coaching piece, how that has transpired over time and where you are with that today.
I was about 7 to 10 years in, right? Humming along. I had already built out the PIP silo and I will never forget it. I crossed 750,000 in gross revenue and I was like, how did I get here? I never thought I was going to make this kind of money. And it was like a lot of money for me at that point. But I was super stressed. I was overwhelmed. And I used to think, oh, well, it must be cool if you have partners. You go behind closed doors and they know all the answers. That's bullshit. And they don't, right? Most of the times they get in there, they start fighting and they want to set each other on fire, basically. But, I never forget where I was. I was at my desk. I looked at the current P&L and I was like, man, how did I get here? And what am I going to do to make sure I don't stop here, right? Or I don't regress. So by dumb luck again, I say yes to everything, which I know you do less of as you go up in levels because you can't say yes to all the invites or you will have no time for the important stuff. But at that time, if you're early in your practice and you haven't broken $1 million yet, say yes to everything, right? Like, don't say no to a meeting. Don't say no to an interview because you never know the door that's going to open. So James Joseph calls me up. James and I are friends forever. He says, oh, let's go out for lunch. We go out for lunch and I'm talking to him. I had just listened to the E-Myth as I'm crossing 750. And my head is like, I'm building a business. Screw this job stuff. I'm going to be a business leader. I didn't know what that meant, but I was going to do that. I knew I wanted to be entrepreneurial. While I loved the lawyering, I 10x loved the business side, right? 1,000x loved the business side. When other people are scared, I'm in my sweet spot. I turn into like that's my zone. So I turned around and we have lunch at this steakhouse. James keeps looking at his watch because time management, he keeps looking at his watch. And I bring up the E-Myth and he goes, listen, I got to turn you on to this organization. I'm a part of Atticus. Boom. So I went to, at the time they had a 3-day practice builder, right? 2 days they covered time management. They covered the 4 basics, right? Time management, cash flow and profitability, human resources, and marketing, right? Mm-hmm. And they're ingrained in my head. I can rattle them off the top. And by the end of the second day, because I think it was 2 days, I remember where I was at Orlando Airport. I'm overlooking the main.
You're in the Hyatt.
I'm in the Hyatt, right? And I'm calling my wife. I go, listen, it's a lot of money, right? It's 12 grand. And I already put down like 3. They'll give me a credit back, but I think I got to do this. But I still to this day do the same thing. I don't spend money without running it by my leadership team. So then I didn't realize it. My wife was my leadership team and Janira was my leadership team. And they were the foundation of it now, still 20 years later. But they both said, look, we believe in you. So if you say this is where we need to go, commit to it, right? And that was how I got started with masterminds and coaching. And, within a year I had finished up their basic level to practice growth. And they said, look, you need to be and dominate your market. I had already broken the 1 million mark, which I thought was the threshold at the time. And I did the 3 years. That's where you and I met.
That's right.
Right.
PG or DYM.
Yes. DYM. Yeah. So I did the
right.
Dominate Your Market, and that was a powerhouse group. I mean, it was a can't lose group with guys like you, Sue Ann Van Derminen, and all the ladies that were in there. I mean, we had Craig Goldenfarb and Herb Auger and Mark Whitehead, like all the names that are now becoming 8-figure or multi-8-figure firms. And there was some in the room at the time that were 8-figure firms. The 2 ladies out of California running this massive operation. I don't know if they're 8 figures, but I think they are. So it was just you cannot lose when you're in a room of people that are bigger and better than you. And I still look for rooms like that. That's the key to the masterminds I go to,
Right. I think the issue with masterminds is you get really great ideas. You have really great conversations with people, and they have completely different viewpoints than you do. They come at things differently, where from where you're looking, you can't see that viewpoint, but then they bring you basically to their level. It's a wonderful thing. Now, the issue that you have in masterminds is you can walk away with 50 different ideas out of the mastermind. And typically you need a support structure for accountability and for helping you really narrow down the thing that's going to have the most impact on your firm. And so I know you do coaching as part of that. And so tell me about that.
So, I'm a huge believer of coaching for the accountability piece, the self-awareness piece, emotional intelligence piece, right? All the things that people don't pay attention to, which are the hallmarks of true leadership, true businesses that set you apart. Like if you're the lawyer that comes out of your office and throws the laptop across the room, like the stories I hear on interviews, then you're not a leader and it's not a business. Nobody's going to want to buy that because you got chaos and pandemonium. That's not a culture of excellence, right?
Right.
So coaching is pivotal in that. You get a strong coach, and if you hit it off like I did with like Patrick Wilson, he's the mirror, right? He tells me the way it is. He tells me, well, are you at your most optimal if you function this way? And I have those aha moments.
Right.
Right.
And what's great about Patrick? So Patrick's going to be on the podcast in a couple of weeks.
He's the best.
Yes, I love Patrick. I actually, love most of the people that are over there at Atticus. They're great, but Patrick in particular, he would, I think, agree with this. Is I kind of call him my curmudgeon because at the end of the day, he is just so much. He will just say the way it is, and it is so necessary. I mean, look, Tom, you're an aggressive, outgoing guy, right? And so I imagine that you bowl a lot of people over, and it's just your natural way. So you've got to have somebody who really will tell you the way it is and hold your feet to the fire.
Yeah. Patrick does that. And what's interesting about him is he's a coach consultant, right? And what's awesome about him is you're going to end up finding yourself in crisis. Period. It's part of business. If you think you're so good as your fourth year in law and you're breaking $1 million, you just haven't gotten it yet, but it's coming, right? And so like having a coach consultant is awesome because I stuck with him and we still to this day, we're good friends. We talk. He's doing something like a private closed mastermind in the future. I'm going. Like I will support anything he does because the coaching side leads to evolution as a leader, right? They don't give you the answers on the coaching side. The consulting side is sometimes I call him up. I'm like, hey, I need the answers. I don't need self-evolution here. I need the answers. So give me the answers and let me pivot. And he does it all. You will never meet a more experienced business coach in the law firm space, period. Hard stop.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I encourage everybody to listen to that episode specifically because Patrick has. It's funny at the time Patrick and I negotiated his employment agreement with Atticus, and so I've known him since way back when, which I think was '99. So he's been doing this for 25 years, which was just it's an amazing longevity, and the things that he comes up with when we'll be talking are just insights that you just wouldn't go, oh, yeah, why didn't I think of that? But that's exactly what you're getting. And then on the accountability side, which is so important here, I remember distinctly one time, and I don't know, you probably don't have this problem, but there are times at which when I need to be doing something and for whatever reason, I'm, just postponing it for various reasons, right? And so at one point, I think he got annoyed with me because I postponed it 2 or 3 times. And I won't say which party, but he basically had me write a check, a rather large check, to one of the political parties that I did not care for, and basically told me, hey, man, you got a week to do it. If you don't, you're making a donation to this other political party, which was not going to happen. So definitely good motivation there. So,
yeah. And it also, that comes down to knowing yourself, right? Like, so one of the things I did, and it's probably not the right way to do things, is when I come back from masterminds, and I used to do it way more frequently, I didn't pick and choose what I wanted to implement. I just implemented everything. So like with Atticus, no matter what we covered, it was getting implemented. Probably not fair to the team I had at the time to the extent that I can be very overwhelming with that stuff, right? I'm much different now. Now I filter it down. We have Tom's sandbox where all the great ideas go into it and the would-be nice money, once it's there and the budget's there and the infrastructure's there, then we do it. I've grown up a lot over the years. Yeah. So, but when Patrick says, oh, this is the answer, I don't question it. I just do it. Right. I'm going to explain it to the team, but I'm like, look, man, the dude's built 9-figure firms. He knows what he's doing. Who am I to say no?
Well, and the other piece of it is if you had a client who constantly questioned what you told them to do, right? So you're effectively a really professional consultant to your clients.
Right.
And if they're constantly questioning it, you're going to send them on, right? So take the advice, right? And deal with it. Good. Excellent. Well, so really the other topic that I wanted to talk about with you was this issue of buying law firms, and in particular personal injury firms, because you and I had a conversation, and it might have been at the Great Legal Marketing event last year. So we were there, and we were talking about law firms and buying law firms. And you told me you had a unique approach to some retiring PI lawyers in the Long Island area.
Yeah, so it's not buying in the traditional sense that in what I've been doing. And two, it wasn't PI lawyers. These were lawyers that were actually referring me business in decent volume, big cases. And, I'd go out to breakfast with them, and they're already very wealthy. And they're both, I did it twice in the last 2 years, where they were like, yeah, I'm moving to Florida, so you won't be getting much out of me going forward. And, I appreciate it. And maybe if you want to wrap some stuff up or send me, I said, so you basically just folding up your practice, phone number and all. Yeah, I'm going to fold it up. I said, why don't you just give me the phone numbers? Any cases that come in on those lines, they're your cases, right? And one of them does estates work. The other guy does general real estate and miscellaneous stuff. I said, anything you want to do, you stay of counsel. You go on as of counsel to me. And so they did. And so when the calls come in, they get that attribution. And I see no reason to just fold up any amount of equity. So like one of the referring attorneys has a big case right now parked in the office. He's got fee participation on that case. Why would he have just folded up his phone number? And maybe he doesn't need the money. Probably doesn't. He could leave it all to charity. I don't care. But at least you're continuing on, right? Like you're realizing what you built, the financial ROI of that, even after you're semi-retired.
Right. So this is the ultimate in goodwill, right? So they built up this goodwill. It's expressed in their website. It's expressed in the phone number that they have. And eventually it will peter out, right? If they're not active in the marketplace, it will peter out. But what they're doing, so they're getting paid for that goodwill. They don't want to continue. And then on the other side of it, you have them as of counsel, right? So to the extent that there was ever a claim or anything, it's going to be through your firm, and your firm's insurance will take care of it. So they really got a win-win in that scenario. And I think that's important for lawyers to think about, because I hate to see lawyers who don't have a business that they can transfer just shut down, right?
Yes.
Because there's something there. If you have goodwill in the community, there's a way to make that transfer.
Yes.
And this was such a great innovative way for you to be able to make this happen. And I love that whenever we meet and we talk, I always get great new ideas from you, and it's absolutely wonderful. So good. Excellent. So
well, just on that point really quick, the one lawyer who was about to shut down has probably gotten 2 and change in fee participation since he moved to Florida, just from the business we've done together. So at bare minimum, he now says, oh, my goodwill was worth X, right? The market now showed him that there is value to your phone number. And these are guys that didn't even have like Google My Businesses. So I took over the digital side. They had like one standing Google My Business. We transferred that over. So it was all stuff that made sense. And I hated the idea of, I can't stand the idea that as lawyers, we fold up and like we're just hunched over like Willie Loman style, man. You don't have to die at your desk. Go live your life. And when it's my turn to be out, I want a succession plan in place, right? Like I started working on that, and that's different. Now you're talking about intentional succession to another generation of lawyers, and give them the opportunity at the table, and let me reap my ROI that I've sacrificed probably sanity, brain cells, and everything else for.
Excellent. Well, Tom, any last words? Anything you want to add?
No, not really. I mean, I loved coming on. I love the stuff you talk about because it is business heavy, succession heavy. And I wish more lawyers thought like that. We're the only profession where we take care of everybody else in the world, but we don't do succession planning. We don't think, oh, let's build a business we sell. What's your plan? You're just going to die? Okay, just die. But what's going to happen is those files are going to go on anyway, and you're leaving Michigas for your family to take care of. They don't want to deal with that. It's the same thing with real estate, right? When you're 95 holding on to that building and you think it's worth X, I had that happen. I was looking at a building for the office before I bought the place I'm in now. And I went to this guy and he was super sweet, super nice until I made him an offer and he started screaming at me. He wanted like 2 times of what it was worth. I said, listen, please, you're going to leave this building to your family. They don't want it. I'm telling you. And I'm not taking advantage of it. I'm making you a market rate offer. Sure enough, he didn't take the offer and he passed away. And then he left it for his wife to take care of it. And you think she wants to worry about selling a real estate asset? So,
and doing that is way easier than closing down a law practice.
Oh my God. I do not want to do that. So I have something written out already. My wife knows, God forbid, if something's sudden, here are the 5 lawyers you got to go to. Here's the team you need to assemble for transition, sale, et cetera. So bare minimum, you got to put that together so you're not leaving a spouse who has no idea what we really do intrinsically and how it operates. Now, my wife's in the business. She does, but most of them aren't.
Most of them don't, no. And so important point here, just to add on, is that a lot of jurisdictions, Florida in particular, have a requirement that you appoint an inventory attorney. But if you really don't have a succession plan, it's probably best to go out and find another solo or small firm owner who's in your space and do an external buy sell. If nothing else, just to protect your spouse or your kids from having to come in and clean up the mess, because that lawyer then can continue on with your practice. So that's a fantastic point. So thank you. I appreciate it. And I really appreciate you coming on today. So tell us, how can people find you?
LinkedIn. Best way, it's Tona Law. And then there's tonalaw.com, which is my website, which is all being revamped as we speak. And it's been awesome, man. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks. Appreciate it, Tom. Take care.
All right. Thank you.